Rata and the Totara tree. Rata was still a youth. Every day he watched the men of his tribe drag the 2 canoes over the sandbar and paddle away to the fishing grounds. At night he saw them return with the canoes laden with fish, but it was barely enough to feed the many people of the tribe. Rata sat and thought. At last he knew what he must do. He would go with the next sunrise into the great forest of Tane and find a suitable tree. He would chop it down and shape out a canoe that was strong and trustworthy, a delicately carved canoe, telling of the deeds of their ancestors, a canoe that would carry many men and much fish. Before dawn, Rata arose and strode away into the great bush. He walked and walked. Then he came across the tree that he was looking for, a giant Totara, a magnificent tree which towered away up into the blue sky. Rata began his toil. He chipped and chopped, and the sweat poured down his brow, and still he kept working. Near the end of the day, the mighty tree toppled to the ground with a great crash. Rata was well pleased with his day's work, and he headed home. Early the next morning, Rata set off to begin his work on the canoe. When he arrived back at the spot, to his great astonishment, he found the huge tree standing up straight and tall once more. Rata sat down and thought. He scratched his head. Did he only dream yesterday's work? It had felt so real. And still puzzled, he began to chip and chop again at the large tree. As the sun was going down, the tree tumbled to the forest floor once more. Rata went home, weary and perplexed. The next day, when he arrived back at the very same spot, there was the tree standing upright again, with every chip in place. Now Rata knew someone was playing tricks on him, so he thought of a plan. He worked hard again all that day, chopping the tree down, and when it had fallen, he pretended to go home, but then crept back and hid behind a fallen log and watched to see what would happen. Very soon, he heard what sounded like singing, and an amazing sight met his eyes. Thousands of birds and insects came out of the surrounding trees and began picking up the chips and putting them in their place. Behind them, the Patupairahi, the magical children of the night, sang and chanted magical karakia, and the great tree slowly rose up and stood straight and tall once more. Rata leapt out shouting, "Why are you doing this to me? Why?" The shocked birds and insects and the Patupairahi looked up at the wild-eyed Rata. "Because you did not ask Tane, god of the forest, for permission to chop down his tree," they said softly. "We are the guardians of the great forest." Then Rata understood. He felt ashamed. In his haste, he had not remembered the most important part of all. A sadder but wiser boy, he returned to his home. The next day, Rata asked Tane, the god of the forest, for permission to chop down the great Totara so that he may build a canoe. A soft breeze sprang up and whirled around Rata's head, and he knew that Tane had said yes. This time, when the magnificent tree fell down, the birds and insects helped Rata hollow out the trunk, and the Patupairehe chanted karakia and carved nature's fine patterns in the red wood. This indeed was a mighty waka. On her first voyage out to sea, Rata stood proudly at the prow, and he sent a silent thought of thanks to his forest friends. And from that day on, Rata never took another tree from the forest of Tane without first asking.